Okay, so we're recording. Okay, I've got my audio up. But I want to, caution everyone. This is going to be the free response questions for the final. However, I have no idea what the free response questions are going to be on the actual AP exam. So the best way to prepare for that is to just look at all of your assignments for the year, because all of your assignments, all of your homework assignments, that you actually had to draw on and, scan and submit, those are prior free response questions from AP exams going back to like 2010 or something. So that's the best way to study. If you understand all of the assignments that you've had since the beginning and you've been reviewing them all along, then you should see something on the AP exam that you're very familiar with. Okay.
All right.
But just know that this is for the final. So this is going to help you for the final. But when you're preparing, don't just look at these things, because the free responses could be something else. Okay, so what I want to just sort of go over is this is what you've seen over and over and over again, and that's the aggregate demand and supply graph. So, and what you're going to want to be able to do, and I'm going to just pull it up here, okay? Right here, is I want you guys to be able to recognize the difference between an inflationary gap and a recessionary gap, right? So if there is an inflationary gap, that means that the short run, which I lost my Y1 here. Okay, so let me fix this real quick. I somehow deleted my Y1. That means that your short run, actually, let me just pull this. I want to know because I want to refer to both of these. But this is your, obviously this is your aggregate supply and demand. And if your short run equilibrium is to the right of the long run aggregate supply, which is your potential, right? And this is all should be reviewed. But if your short run is over here, right? Let's just put it, let's make this easier to see. So I'll put the aggregate demand there and the short run aggregate supply there. So if this is where your short run equilibrium is, you've actually got a output and an employment level higher than what we would call over here full employment at YF, that lines up with the long run aggregate supply. And what this would look like over here, well, first of all, this is your inflationary gap, right? Because you're actually operating at a level that is over a potential, right? And so what typically is going to happen is at some point wages are going to go up and aggregate demand is going to drop. So you end up, back, you're going to get shifts like this and this, whoops, not that guy, this guy, until you end up back here, right? But if you're asked to look at, if the question says that the economy is operating, I want to use the right terminology. Well, okay, if they're operating above a potential, or they say that their actual employment level is above full employment, which is here, then you know that you're going to see a graph that looks like this, and you're going to have that. Let me put this guy back up here, and you're going to have that gap right here. Whoops, which is your inflationary gap, okay? Now, it's important to be able to know what this situation looks like on this graph, which you all should know is the Phillips curve. So you've got the long run of Phillips curve here and the short run of Phillips curve downward sloping. And this graph shows the relationship between the inflation rate and the unemployment rate. So if you have an employment rate above the long run, or to the right, or above full employment, or to the right of the long run aggregate supply, then over here is going to be just the opposite, because this is unemployment. So that would look like a point right here. Actually, I'm going to say it, sorry, backwards here. So you're going to have an unemployment rate lower. So you're going to have a lower unemployment rate than the natural rate, which is very rare, but it happens. So like if the natural rate of unemployment in the typical economy is about 5%, somewhere between 4 and 5%. So if it's below that, then you'd have a situation that looks like this, and you'd have a higher price level. You'd have, higher inflation than if you went down here to this point where we're at the natural rate of unemployment. So this point right here matches up with a point along here. And this is going to, obviously depend on what types of shifts you get in the short run aggregate supply and the aggregate demand. But over here in the Phillips curve, since there's only one short run, there's only one downward sloping curve, and the long run Phillips curve is perfectly inelastic, it's vertical, then if you're going to, the only way that you're going to get from an unemployment level that's below the natural is to move down and along the line, okay? So the way to think about that is that if you're here, okay, and you have an inflation rate that's higher than it would be at the natural the natural level of unemployment, the way you're going to get a movement along the line here is to get a shift over here. So if we're actually going to raise the unemployment here, in other words, go from U1 to UN, unemployment actually goes up, which means people lose their jobs to go from here to here. Okay, Lucy, are you following me so far? Is it all good so far?
Yes.
Okay. Now, in order to get this movement on the short run Phillips curve, I keep getting the wrong guy. In order to get this movement on the short run Phillips curve down along, the short run Phillips curve, you're going to need to have a leftward shift in the aggregate demand. So if we had a shift from here to here, you see the price level going down and the employment level going down. That's going to look like a movement from here to here, with the inflation rate, which is the price levels, the rate of inflation. If that's dropping and unemployment is rising, that movement, if I could get the right guy, that movement from here to here is the same as this shift from here to here. And typically this happens first. You get this shift, and then you get this movement, or you get a combination of a shift in the short run aggregate supply shifts a little. This shifts a little, so you end up somewhere like right there. But anyway, the thing to sort of keep in your head is a shift over here means a movement over here. And they're just the opposite, because as you move from left to right in the aggregate demand and supply, you're actually gaining employment. When you're moving from left to right over here, you're gaining in unemployment, which is just the opposite. Okay, price levels are the same. A price level going up and down is very similar to the inflation rate going up and down. Okay, and I believe that's all I wanted to sort of say about that. Let me look at this. Let me look over this, make sure. Okay, now what you want to know? Okay, so let's say that we're in this situation where we have an inflationary gap. Okay, and let me just get this. And you're going to want to think about what kind of monetary policy would close this gap. So let me bring this guy down here. So we've got this. We're actually operating at a level higher than a potential. So the Federal Reserve is going to want to close that gap. Okay, and what they're going to want to do is actually raise interest rates. So the way they're going to raise interest rates is they're going to try to contract, and that's why we call this contractionary monetary policy. They're going to want to contract the money supply. So they're going to want to take money out of the supply. So in order to do that, they sell bonds, because when they sell bonds, banks have to pay for them. So that takes money out of the money supply. So what you're going to see is you're going to see a leftward shift right here, which means you're going to get a higher interest rate, which means that all spending that is interest sensitive, like buying houses, a lot of people borrow the money to buy a car, all that type of spending is going to become more expensive. So you're going to end up doing this, contracting the money supply is going to cause this downward shift in aggregate demand, because if you remember, part of aggregate demand is domestic investment spending. So when that drops, this whole aggregate demand should shift to the left, which should bring the economy back to its potential. Okay. Now, if you've got a recessionary gap, if you're actually operating below over here, right, then the Federal Reserve obviously is going to want to shift it to the right over here, lower the interest rate, and they do just the opposite. They actually buy bonds, so that actually puts money in. And this is all review, so I'm just going over it. So, you have any questions on any of these graphs, or how it works, Lucy?
No, I'm good. Thank you.
Okay. All right. So I think you're fine. Let me just look at this really quickly to make sure. And I talked about well, actually, I can look here. Let's see. Okay. Now, 2, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on 2 at all, because I did a video, and you can find it on Whiteboard, because you did one analysis of a banking balance sheet for an assignment, and I also put up a video of another analysis that was done on the con videos, right? So just know that you're going to need to use the formulas. Let me look. Really, let me make sure I'm not going to leave anything out here. Yeah, you're going to want to use the money multiplier. If I could say it, money multiplier formula. So once again, I want to remind everyone to don't forget, I mean, really use this study guide right here and the one for formulas. I believe the one with the graphs also has that formula for the money multiplier down here at the bottom. So these are very, very important to know right down here. 1 over the reserve ratio, which is a percentage. You know, it's not the actual amount of money that a bank has in reserves. It's the percentage of their demand deposits that they need to keep in their reserves. And the only other thing I want to remind you guys of is that when there is a change in, well, how can I want to word this so I don't actually give you the answer, but keep in mind that when there's a change in the money going into the overall money supply, if it goes up, what what can change is there's going to be a change in the overall amount of demand of deposits throughout the system. But keep in mind that total reserves are not going to change. And I actually explain why that is in one of my past videos. So you can go back and review that. Total reserves are not going to change because the way it works is you're going to get as demand deposits go up. If say that the reserve requirement is 10%, as the demand deposits go up, reserves are going to be they're just not going to change. And if I say anything else, I'm going to give you too much of the answer. But just I want everyone to review that so they understand why that when there's a change in the money supply, the total reserves throughout the whole banking system does not change. Okay. Now that's all I want to say about that. And then the last one we're going to look at is this idea of a currency exchange rate. Now, the important thing here is to understand when you are given okay, so let's say you're given, let me just get a blank sheet here. Say that well, just for say that $1 equals 2 euros, right? And say that it changes. Say that it changes to now $1 equals 1.8 euros. Right? Did the dollar appreciate relative to the euro, or did the dollar depreciate relative to the euro? Do you know, Lucy, since you're my only student?
Did it depreciate relative to the euro?
Right, because here you're exactly right. So here a dollar buys 2 euros, and then here a dollar only buys 1.8 euros. Now, if we were to turn this around, let me just check something really quickly here. if we were to turn this around, actually we don't have to. Okay, that's fine. You always want to have one of these the same. Like if I were to say 1.5 here, then it gets sorry. If I were to say 1.5 and this is 1.4 or something like that, then it gets complicated. Then you got to and then you have to do some math. But if it's 1 and 1, it's easy. Okay, so you're not going to have anything. This is what you're going to see, like So that's easy. Now, the other thing is, okay, so if we have if we have this situation where well, actually, let's so if the dollar, if the dollar, let me just print out, it depreciates, right? Then we should know depreciate. Can I spell it? Depreciates. Is that it? Oh, I can't spell it. Depreciates. There's an E there, right? Depreciate. Actually, that's boy. That's how my heart. Come on. Okay. Then the euro appreciates, right? It's just the opposite.
Yes.
If one, then the other. If I could spell it, let's try. It's not that I can't spell. It's just I can't type. There you go. Okay. So that we know, right? So the question is, if we're buying European goods in America, and we're importing, or America is importing goods from Europe, do they get more expensive or less expensive? If the euro is appreciating. If the U.S. is buying Europe, if the U.S. is importing from Europe.
More expensive?
More expensive, yeah, because the euro is more expensive. If we're importing from Europe, we first have to exchange or buy euros for dollars in order to buy a European products. So if the euro is going to appreciate against the dollar, then European goods become more expensive to Americans, and American goods become less expensive to Europeans. So it's important to sort of understand those relationships. It can get confusing, Now, if we have this situation, okay, and we say that it is now more expensive for Americans to buy European goods, what happens to net exports for Europe? Do they go up or do they go down?
Down, because
they go down. They go down. Absolutely, they go down. Okay, so they're going down. Now, if net exports go down, what is the formula for aggregate demand, or the expression? Equals, aggregate demand equals consumption, right, plus government spending, plus investment, right, plus net exports. Okay, so if net exports go down, aggregate demand is going to go down, isn't it? Do you agree? In Europe, right? Do you agree?
Yes.
Okay, so if aggregate demand goes down, and this is why knowing these graphs are so important, because to get to the answer that they want you to give, you got to work through the whole cause and effect chain, right? So now we've figured out that if starting off with this change right here, right here, starting off with this change right here, we've gotten from this to now we know aggregate demand is shifting to the left because it's dropping, isn't it? So say we're here, say we're at full employment, say we're something like right here, and then this change in the currency. Let me put that there. And aggregate demand drops. What's going to happen? And so we're going from YF to like Y1 right there. What happens to unemployment if we move from here to here? What happens to unemployment? Does it go up or does it go down?
It increases.
Yes, right. So that's going to be so over here, if we're here, right? So being on this long run Phillips curve here at the natural rate of unemployment is just like being here in the aggregate demand at a full employment. Okay, so if we're going down to there because the aggregate demand has shifted because net exports went down because as a result, I should say not because, but as a result of the euro appreciating, right? Then we're going to end up, whoops, wrong way. Sorry about that. We're going to end up here, right? Boom, right there. Okay. So you really need to be able to know what's going on. What's going on with in terms of what happens if there's a change in the relative exchange rate, and how does that sort of chain react all the way to an increase in unemployment. Okay, and I think that's about it. I was going to say one more thing. What was I thinking about? Oh, in general, everybody, Lucy and everyone who has gotten through to this far into the video and is still watching, net exports going down is a result of that country's currency appreciating. So like if I say we need a strong dollar, if I'm trying to make that argument, the counter argument is if the dollar gains value relative to the rest of the world, then our goods become more expensive to the rest of the world. Our net exports drop, and we get a deficit in our current account, in our trade balance, and that can potentially hurt the economy because we'll actually, it'll actually shrink, our real output, right? And we could, lose a lot of jobs. So to just sort of summarize, an increase in value in a country's currencies typically makes their net exports go down, which typically makes their real output drop, and unemployment go up, which is not good. Okay, and I think that's about it. Let me look. Yeah. Okay. Well, actually, the last thing here is you should know, and this is review. What time is this? Okay, and this is review. But if net exports, are okay, let me say it like this: if net exports go up, let me just get an error. Can I say it? Arrow. If they go up, then capital outflow goes up. Okay. Now, why is that? Why am I going? Well, if capital outflow goes up over here, then this right here is going to mean our current account goes into surplus or goes up. If it's even, then it's going to go into surplus. This means that our capital or financial account goes into deficit. Now, one of your, and this is the third time, but I'm going to say it one more time. In this formula sheet right here, the last thing on here is wrong, okay? The last thing on here is wrong. If it would come up, come on, come up, slow. Whenever I'm wanting it to be quick, it takes forever. I don't know why it's doing that. Here it goes. Whew, took a long time. This right down here is wrong. This should be current account. The capital account and financial account are the same thing. This should be current account plus financial account always equals zero. Okay, so when you look at this, if net exports are going up, capital outflow, capital is flowing out of the country, which means our capital account or financial account is losing. We're losing capital out of the country, but our current account, our trade balance, the balance between, or the difference between our exports and our imports is going up, because net exports is exports minus imports. So if we're exporting more than we're importing, then we have a positive trade balance. If they're equal, then it's balanced, right? But if we have a positive trade balance, then we have a surplus in our current account, right? And if we have a surplus in our current account, we have to have a deficit in our capital account or a financial account, because they have to equal zero. Okay, so so they go opposite. So now the proper way to think about this is that current account plus capital account or financial capital and the financial are synonymous. So if net exports go up, we get a surplus in our current account and capital outflow. If net exports go down, that means we're importing more, and we get a deficit in our current account, but imports, right? If let me just go like this real quick. If net exports are going down, that means that we have capital inflow, imports inflow. Okay, it's easy to remember. Imports, if imports go up, it means capital inflow goes up, capital outflow goes down, right? Because these, if one's, more inflow means less outflow. It's kind of, what's the word? It's just like more imports mean less exports, right? Or less net exports. So, or actually, I should say it like this: more inflow means less net capital outflow, not less outflow, less net capital outflow. But I don't want to get too complicated here. It's getting too complicated. You don't need to know all that. But what you need to know is this relationship right here. Where's my arrow guy? Okay. Capital inflow goes up, right? So when capital inflow goes up, it means the capital account is going into surplus. And so these have to balance. So if capital account is going into surplus, the current account or the balance of trade or net exports has to be going into deficit, right? Okay. Does that all make sense to you, Lucy? You have any questions?
Yeah, it makes sense. Thank you.
Okay, good. So so if you understand all that, you won't have any problems with the free response. Now, the free response on the final, because you're doing it on a blackboard, you're not going to have to draw a graph. I'm just going to show you, a series of graphs, and you'll have to identify the correct one. But just keep in mind that when you take the when you take the AP exam, it's going to be pen and paper, and you'll actually have to draw. There's a really good chance you'll actually have to draw one or more graphs. Okay, just want to warn you of that. Just like the assignments. Okay.
Okay.
Okay, and that's about it. And thank you for coming. You will certainly get a credit for attendance, and I hope that. I have no worries that you're going to do well. Have you decided when you're going to take it? I'm going to go ahead and stop the video. It's fine. Have you decided when you're going to